Every culture on Earth has a story about a place that is not on any map. We are about to journey through 25 of these enchanted realms, from sunken cities to hidden paradises, and uncover the human hopes and fears that built them. By the end, you will possess a new understanding of why we dream of lands just beyond our reach. What drives the persistent legend of a perfect city swallowed by the sea? Why do so many stories warn of a fairy world where time itself bends? These are not mere fairy tales. They are profound reflections of who we are, capturing our deepest anxieties about loss and our brightest dreams of utopia. Each legendary realm acts as a mirror, showing us the values of the society that imagined it, whether it is a warning against pride, a longing for peace, or an explanation for the unexplainable. We will travel from the misty Celtic otherworld to the golden mirages of the New World, from literary sanctuaries to whispered hollow earth theories. Each story offers a unique window into a mythical landscape that feels almost real. So, what does your own dream of a perfect world look like? Perhaps no other legend echoes so loudly across the centuries as that of Atlantis. Its story begins not with ancient mariners, but with a philosopher. In his dialogues, Plato describes a formidable island empire, a society of immense power and sophistication that existed 9,000 years before his own time. This was not a simple village, but a marvel of engineering and governance, said to possess a grand capital city built in concentric rings of land and water. Its people, blessed with abundant resources and advanced knowledge, grew proud. They began to forget the gods who favored them, their ambition curdling into arrogance. As punishment, the story goes, the entire island was swallowed by the sea in one terrible day and night of earthquakes and floods, vanishing forever beneath the waves. This dramatic end is the heart of its power. Atlantis stands as the ultimate archetype of the lost civilization, a dual symbol of human potential and its peril. It represents a utopian ideal, a golden age of achievement we long to rediscover. Simultaneously, it is the definitive cautionary tale, a warning that even the greatest societies can fall if they succumb to hubris. For over 2 millennia, this duality has fueled endless speculation. Scholars and adventurers have proposed countless locations, from the Mediterranean island of Santorini, shattered by a volcanic cataclysm, to somewhere beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the Atlantic Ocean. The very lack of evidence becomes a canvas for imagination, inspiring everything from Renaissance art to modern films and persistent theories about advanced ancient technology. Atlantis set the template. It taught us how to dream of a perfect world that was tragically lost, and in doing so, established the pattern for every mythical realm that would follow, each one a reflection of a different human hope or fear. But while Atlantis speaks of a civilization lost to the sea, another legendary island offers a gentler promise. In the midst of Arthurian legend lies Avalon, the Isle of Apples. This is not a realm of punishment, but one of healing and rest. After the tragic final battle at Camlan, where King Arthur was gravely wounded, the story tells us he was carried away by mysterious figures, often led by his sister, the enchantress Morgan Le Fay. Their destination was this hidden island, a sanctuary veiled in perpetual mist where time itself seemed to slow. Avalon was described as a land of gentle orchards, its name derived from the old word for apple, a fruit long associated with immortality and the otherworld in Celtic belief. Here, Arthur would be tended to, his wounds healed, as he waited for the hour when his people would need him to return. This powerful image transforms a moment of profound loss into one of hopeful suspension. Avalon represents a sacred pause, a threshold between a heroic life and whatever comes after. It is a place of transition, not an end. This concept is deeply rooted in older Celtic mythology, where islands to the west were often seen as gateways to the otherworld, a realm of eternal youth and peace accessible only to the chosen or the pure of heart. Morgan Le Fay herself evolves from earlier goddess figures associated with sovereignty and magic, becoming the guardian of this liminal space. The legend became so potent that it sought a home in our world. For centuries, Glastonbury Tor in Somerset, England, a striking hill that rises dramatically from flat wetlands, was identified as the real Avalon, especially when monks claimed to have discovered the graves of Arthur and Guinevere there in the 12th century. Whether historical fact or pious invention, this connection shows how powerfully we yearn to anchor our myths in tangible soil. So Avalon offers a different kind of mirror. If Atlantis reflects our fear of catastrophic failure, Avalon reflects our deep desire for a second chance, for a merciful pause after great struggle, and the enduring hope that our greatest heroes are not truly gone, but merely resting, waiting in a mist-shrouded realm just beyond sight. The shimmering mirage of a city made entirely of gold is a legend of a different kind, born not from philosophical parable but from the collision of two worlds. This is the story of El Dorado, a name that literally means the Gilded One. Its origin lies not in a lost metropolis, but in a breathtaking ritual performed by the Muisca people in the highlands of what is now Colombia. When a new leader was to take power, the ceremony involved covering his body entirely in fine gold dust. He would then journey on a raft to the center of a sacred lake, like Lake Guatavita, and immerse himself, washing the gold into the water as an offering to the gods. This act of sacred offering, of trading immense material wealth for spiritual legitimacy, was a profound cultural moment. To the newly arriving Europeans, however, the story was filtered through a lens of insatiable greed and literal-minded conquest. The idea of a man coated in gold was incomprehensible as a ritual, so it was transformed in the telling. The gilded man became a golden king, and his kingdom became a city of gold, and that city grew into an empire of unimaginable wealth hidden deep in the uncharted jungles. This single misunderstanding, this alchemy of indigenous practice and colonial desire, created one of history's most potent and destructive myths. It launched a fever dream of exploration that would last for centuries. Conquistadors like Gonzalo Pizarro, brother of the more famous Francisco, led brutal expeditions into the Amazon driven by this golden phantom. Even figures of the Elizabethan age, like Sir Walter Raleigh, were captivated, mounting costly voyages in search of the legendary city to enrich his queen and secure his own fortune. These quests were not adventures but tragedies, resulting in immense hardship, conflict, and loss of life for both European explorers and the indigenous communities in their path. The true El Dorado was never a place to be found on a map. It was and remains a powerful symbol of the human capacity to see not what is, but what we desperately wish to be there. It reflects how a story can be utterly transformed in its translation from one culture to another, and how the pursuit of a myth can have very real and often devastating consequences. The gold was real, but it was never in the streets. It was in the lake and in the ceremony, a reminder that value is not always where we think to look. The golden fever of El Dorado was a myth born from conquest, but another legendary realm emerged from a deep longing for escape. In the midst of the global uncertainty of the 1930s, a British author named James Hilton offered readers a different kind of sanctuary. His novel Lost Horizon introduced the world to Shangri-La, a hidden valley monastery high in the Tibetan Himalayas. This was not a city of treasure, but a library of wisdom, a place where the frantic pace of the outside world simply did not apply. In Hilton's story, a group of travelers stumble upon this secluded lamasery, where the inhabitants live for centuries, dedicating themselves to art, learning, and spiritual peace, all while preserving the cultural achievements of a world they believe is bent on destroying itself. The genius of Shangri-La was that it felt both utterly new and strangely familiar. Hilton skillfully wove his fictional paradise with threads from genuine Tibetan Buddhist tradition, particularly the ancient legend of Shambhala, a hidden kingdom of enlightened beings that would one day emerge to save the world from darkness. By blending this Eastern mystical concept with a Western narrative of utopian refuge, he created a myth that resonated with a profound and universal human desire. In a century marked by industrial noise and the gathering clouds of war, the idea of a quiet, ageless valley where time itself slowed down was irresistibly compelling. It was a sanctuary not just from physical danger but from modern anxiety itself. The impact was immediate and lasting. The name Shangri-La entered the common language as a synonym for any perfect, secluded haven. The myth proved so powerful that it began to reverse engineer itself onto the real world. Multiple locations in the Himalayas, from parts of Nepal to the Yunnan province in China, now vie for the title of the real Shangri-La, their valleys promoted as earthly reflections of Hilton's dream. This reveals something beautiful about how legends work. While El Dorado was a mirage that fueled destruction in its pursuit, Shangri-La became an ideal that inspires preservation and peace. It shows how a story can give shape to our deepest yearning for respite, offering a mental and spiritual refuge long before anyone tries to find it on a map. While Shangri-La offers a sanctuary of peace, the fairy tales of old Europe whisper of a realm far more unpredictable, a world that exists not in some distant valley but literally beside our own. This is the fairy realm, a parallel dimension of enchantment that touches our world at liminal points, places and times that are neither here nor there. Its borders are the fairy rings of mushrooms that appear overnight in a meadow, the ancient burial mounds that dot the countryside, and the fleeting moments of dusk and dawn, the so-called in-between times when the veil between worlds is said to grow thin. To step across this threshold is to enter a reality governed by entirely different rules. The inhabitants of this realm are as varied as the landscapes they are said to inhabit. They are not the tiny, winged pixies of later children's stories, but can be noble and beautiful, mischievous and cunning, or profoundly dangerous. They might offer help or weave enchantments, but their morality is not our own, their motives often inscrutable to human understanding. This is why a rich tapestry of rules and taboos grew up around them, a survival guide for accidental visitors. One of the most famous warnings is never to eat or drink anything offered in the fairy realm, for to consume their food is to be bound to their world forever, losing all desire to return home. But the most mind-bending rule of all concerns time itself. Within the fairy realm, time does not flow as it does here. A single night of dancing in a fairy hall might pass in what feels like hours, but when the mortal guest stumbles back into the waking world, they find that decades or even a century have gone by in their absence. This concept of fairy time transforms the realm from a simple magical place into a profound metaphor for the perils of enchantment and distraction. It speaks to a deep cultural anxiety about losing oneself, about being so captivated by wonder or pleasure that you sacrifice your place in the real world and the life you were meant to live. The stories served as both warning and explanation, a way to rationalize sudden disappearances or the strange return of someone long thought gone. They taught that the world is wider and stranger than it appears, and that some borders once crossed cannot be uncrossed without a cost. Far from the structured fairy hills, the Atlantic Ocean holds a different kind of phantom, one that has haunted maps and mariners for centuries. This is the island of Hy-Brasil, a spectral landmass said to lie somewhere in the misty waters off the west coast of Ireland. Unlike Avalon, which is a place of healing, Hy-Brasil was described as a land of pure and simple happiness, an island paradise where sickness and hardship were unknown. Its name comes from the old Irish term for noble or fortunate, and its legend is deeply entwined with the ancient gods of Ireland, the Tuatha Dé Danann. After their reign was said to have ended, these mythical beings retreated from the surface world, choosing to live in hidden, parallel realms. Hy-Brasil was believed by many to be one of their great otherworldly fortresses, a place of eternal feasting and music forever veiled from mortal eyes. What makes this legend so captivating is its stubborn appearance in the physical world of navigation. For hundreds of years, from the 1400s well into the 1800s, cartographers consistently drew Hy-Brasil on their charts. It was typically depicted as a perfect circle, often with a river or a channel cutting straight through its center. Sailors returned with sworn accounts of glimpsing its high cliffs and green fields through the parting fog, only to have it vanish as they drew near. The rules of its appearance were specific and tantalizing. It was said the island revealed itself for just one single day every 7 years, remaining cloaked in impenetrable mist for all other times. This periodic visibility made it the ultimate maritime mirage, a goal that felt just barely attainable, driving countless expeditions to search for it. The legend proved so persistent that it even crossed the Atlantic in name. When Portuguese explorers reached the shores of South America and found a land rich in a certain red dyewood, they called it Terra do Brasil, land of the red ember-like wood. The name stuck, and thus the modern nation of Brazil carries a faint, ghostly echo of a Celtic paradise that was never there. Hy-Brasil stands as a testament to the power of hope projected onto the blank spaces of a map. It represents not a warning, but a pure, persistent lure, the belief that just over the horizon, obscured by the very next bank of fog, lies an island of perfect contentment waiting to be found. While mariners searched for islands in the Western Sea, the knights and kings of medieval Europe dreamed of a savior rising in the East. In the 12th century, as the wars of the Crusades stretched on, a story began to circulate that offered a shimmer of hope. It spoke of a magnificent Christian empire, untouched by the conflict, thriving somewhere beyond the lands of Islam. Its ruler was not a pope or an emperor, but a priest and a king combined, a figure known as Prester John. His very name, a version of Presbyter John or Priest John, promised a realm where spiritual and earthly power were perfectly united. This was not just another kingdom, it was a divine ally, a beacon of Christian strength waiting to be found. The legend grew from whispers into a powerful conviction, fueled by a single, extraordinary document. In the middle of the 1200s, a letter began to circulate across the courts of Europe, purportedly written by Prester John himself. It was addressed to the Byzantine emperor, and it described a paradise on earth. The letter claimed his kingdom spanned the 3 Indies, a vague term for lands in Asia and Africa, and was a place of impossible peace and staggering wealth. It spoke of rivers that flowed with gemstones, of a palace made of crystal, and of subjects who lived in harmony without greed or conflict. But the letter also described marvels that blurred the line between faith and fantasy. It mentioned the fountain of youth, whose waters could restore vitality, and the gates of Alexander, a mythical barrier built by the ancient conqueror to imprison savage tribes. Most importantly, Prester John wrote of his immense army. 72 kings served under his command, and he expressed his desire to march westward, to visit the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and confront the enemies of the faith. For a Europe weary of crusading setbacks, this letter was electrifying. It was, of course, a forgery, likely crafted by a clever European scribe, but its contents were less important than the profound need it fulfilled. The legend of Prester John became a psychological lifeline, a way to believe that Christendom was not alone, that a mighty, righteous force was out there, ready to tip the scales. This belief directly shaped the age of exploration centuries later. When Portuguese navigators like Vasco da Gama began sailing down the coast of Africa, one of their stated missions was to make contact with the kingdom of Prester John, hoping to forge an alliance that would encircle their rivals. They eventually did make contact with the Christian kingdom of Ethiopia, which they initially believed was the legendary priest king's domain. So the myth, born from a desperate hope for a military ally, ultimately helped guide explorers to a real and ancient Christian culture they never knew existed. The kingdom of Prester John was a mirror held up to medieval Europe's anxieties and aspirations, a perfect realm conjured from parchment and prayer to assure them that they were not alone in a seemingly hostile world. The search for paradise has always looked outward, across oceans or toward distant mountains, but one of the most persistent modern legends suggests we have been looking in the wrong direction entirely. What if the ultimate repository of ancient wisdom and advanced technology is not on the surface of our world but deep within it? This is the core idea of Agartha, a legendary civilization said to thrive in the vast, hollow interior of the earth. While the concept of subterranean realms appears in many ancient mythologies, from the Greek underworld to the Nordic Svartalfheima, the Agartha we know today is largely a product of the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a time when spiritualism and speculative science were intertwining in fascinating ways. The figure most responsible for shaping this modern myth was a French occultist named Alexander Saint-Yves d'Alveder. In the 1880s, he published detailed accounts of Agartha, which he described not as a primitive cave network but as a vast, illuminated world. He claimed it was governed by a supreme spiritual leader, sometimes called the King of the World, and populated by beings of immense intellect and peace who had mastered energies and sciences far beyond our own. This hidden realm was said to be accessible through a global network of tunnels, with entrances at the poles or in remote mountain ranges like the Himalayas. The appeal of this idea is profound. In an age of increasing industrialization and global conflict, Agartha offered a powerful narrative of hope and hidden order. It proposed that all was not chaos on the surface, that somewhere beneath the strife, a perfected society endured, safeguarding the lost knowledge of antediluvian ages. This civilization was often conflated or connected with the older Buddhist legend of Shambhala, creating a powerful fusion of Eastern mysticism and Western esoteric thought. The imagined capital of this inner world became a beacon of ultimate truth, a secret sun at the center of our planet. The legend's endurance speaks to a very human desire to believe that somewhere, even if we cannot see it, a higher form of civilization persists, holding the answers we have lost or have yet to discover. It transforms the unknown depths beneath our feet from mere geology into a library, a sanctuary, and a promise. The ocean's hunger for land is a memory written into the very bones of some coastlines. Along the southwestern tip of England, where Cornwall juts defiantly into the Atlantic, there lingers a local legend as deep and cold as the surrounding sea. This is Lyonesse, a lost kingdom said to have once connected the mainland to the Isles of Scilly, now a scattered archipelago over 20 miles offshore. In myth, it was a land of surpassing beauty and fertility, with 140 prosperous villages, lush forests, and fields that yielded abundant harvests. It was also the homeland of one of the great knights of the Round Table, Tristan, whose tragic love story with Isolde is woven into the fabric of Arthurian romance. Here, Tristan was a prince, his sorrows rooted in a realm that would itself be claimed by sorrow. The legend tells of a single, terrifying night when a monstrous storm surge, combined with a great earthquake, caused the sea to rush in without warning. The land was swallowed whole, drowning its people and leaving only the highest hilltops as the islands we see today. It is a classic tale of a sudden, catastrophic deluge, a local echo of the Atlantis narrative, but with a distinctly Celtic, melancholic soul. What makes Lyonesse so haunting is the persistent folklore that followed the flood. For centuries, fishermen from Cornwall and the Scillies told of glimpsing the outlines of stone walls and field boundaries beneath the clear water on calm days. More eerily, there were stories of hearing the drowned church bells of Lyonesse ringing mournfully from beneath the waves during stormy weather, a phantom peal for a lost world. This auditory ghost story speaks to the profound sense of place and memory that anchors the myth. It transforms a geological event into a cultural elegy, a way to explain both the visible separation of the islands and the deep, subconscious grief for a landscape that once was. And science offers a compelling foundation for this grief. At the end of the last ice age, sea levels were significantly lower. The area between Cornwall and the Scilly Isles was indeed a wide, fertile plain, a prehistoric landscape inhabited by early peoples. As glaciers melted, the seas rose steadily over thousands of years, slowly but inexorably claiming that land. The final separation of the islands from the mainland likely occurred in a series of dramatic storm events, which would have lived on in collective memory as a single, world-ending catastrophe. So Lyonesse is more than a folk tale. It is a folk memory, a poetic truth born from observable geography. It represents how communities process profound environmental change, transforming the slow creep of rising waters into a legendary night of loss and preserving the echo of their ancestral home in the summer, beautiful story of bells ringing beneath the sea. The deep, mournful bells of Lyonesse told for a world lost to the sea, but another legendary realm was born not from loss but from a desperate hunger for plenty. In the cramped, soot-stained villages of medieval Europe, where life was a relentless cycle of labor, scarcity, and hardship, the peasant imagination conjured a paradise of pure, unapologetic indulgence. This was Cocaigne, a folk myth of a land where every dream of the weary and the hungry came true. It was a world turned gloriously upside down, a direct and satirical rebellion against the daily grind. Here, the rivers did not flow with water, but with rich red wine. The fences were not made of wood, but of plump, grilled sausages. The very houses were constructed of sweet, frosted cake, and the shingles on their roofs were crisp, buttery pancakes. In Cocaigne, the ultimate symbol of abundance was a roasted pig that wandered the streets, a knife conveniently stuck in its back, inviting anyone to simply carve off a slice whenever they pleased. Work was not just unnecessary, it was punishable. The official law of the land was a commandment of idleness. This was not a spiritual utopia like Shangri-La, nor a lost civilization like Atlantis. Cocaigne was a bodily utopia, a fantasy of immediate, sensual gratification born from the aching bellies and sore muscles of the common folk. It served as a pressure valve, a shared joke that allowed people to laugh at the absurdity of their own deprivation. The myth was often illustrated in bawdy, humorous poems and paintings, depicting monks abandoning their prayers for a feast and lazy villagers sleeping in fields of pudding. Yet beneath the comedy was a sharp social critique. By imagining a world where food hunted you and shelter was edible, peasants were subtly mocking the rigid, unyielding social order that kept them poor. Cocaigne's influence echoes far beyond the Middle Ages. It laid the groundwork for every later depiction of a land of plenty, from the big rock candy mountain in American folk music to the edible landscapes in children's stories like Hansel and Gretel. It reminds us that sometimes the most powerful myths are not about ancient kings or hidden wisdom, but about the simplest, most human of desires, a dream of a full stomach and a day without toil, painted in the vivid colors of cake, wine, and roast pork. While Cocaigne offered a feast for the body, humanity's oldest written stories yearned for a different kind of purity. Long before the Bible described Eden, the Sumerians of ancient Mesopotamia were etching tales of a blessed land onto clay tablets. They called it Dilmun, and it was described as a place of radiant light and perfect stillness. In their poetry, Dilmun was a land where the lion did not kill, the wolf did not snatch the lamb, and no one uttered a word of sickness or complaint. Most profoundly, it was a place where the concept of death simply did not exist. Old age was unknown. This was not a paradise for humans, at least not initially. It was the sacred garden of the gods themselves, a pristine realm where the divine could rest undisturbed. In one of the world's oldest epic poems, the story of the hero Gilgamesh, his ancestor Utnapishtim, the man who survived the Great Flood, is granted immortality by the gods and sent to live forever in this distant, peaceful land. Dilmun's role expands even further in other texts where it becomes the very workshop of creation. Some myths describe it as the place where the mother goddess Ninhursag, with the help of the water god Enki, fashioned the first humans from clay. This connects the idea of paradise inextricably with the origin of life itself, a garden where divinity and nascent humanity shared a sacred space before the complications of the mortal world began. Yet, for all its mythical grandeur, Dilmun had a very real, tangible counterpart. Scholars are now confident that the land described in these ancient cuneiform scripts corresponds to the civilization centered on the islands of Bahrain in the Persian Gulf. For the Sumerians, Bahrain was a crucial trade partner, a source of precious copper, dates, and distinctive pearl oysters. Sailors returning from those voyages would have spoken of lush, green islands rising from the blue sea, a stark and beautiful contrast to their own arid river plains. This real-world wonder, a fertile land across the water, likely provided the raw material for the myth. The merchants saw a prosperous, blessed island, and the poets, listening to their tales, transformed it into a divine realm. Dilmun's immense significance lies in this duality. It is one of the very first examples in all of human literature of a paradisiacal concept, a written dream of a land untouched by sorrow or decay. It shows us that the longing for a perfect, holy place is as old as writing itself, a dream born equally from spiritual yearning and from the awe inspired by a distant, fruitful shore seen through the eyes of a weary traveler. The sea's memory holds more than sunken stones and lost fields. Along the rugged coast of Brittany, the waves whisper a darker, more intimate tragedy, a story not of a kingdom but of a single, glittering city brought low by human failing. This is the legend of Wise, a city said to have been built below the level of the high tide, protected only by a magnificent dike and a single, massive gate. The king, Gradlon the Great, held the only key to this gate, a solemn responsibility that kept the hungry ocean at bay. Within its walls, Wise was a marvel of wealth and beauty, but also, the tales suggest, a place where pride began to fester. The heart of the city's undoing was Gradlon's own daughter, Princess Dahut. In some versions of the story, she is a rebellious figure given to lavish parties and reckless desires. In others, she is a tragic romantic, deceived by a mysterious stranger who convinces her that the key to the city is the key to his heart. Whatever her motive, the outcome is the same. One stormy night, Dahut takes the key from her sleeping father and unlocks the great gate. The sea, held back for generations, surges through with terrifying force. The bells of the city's churches ring out in alarm as the waters rise, a frantic echo of Lyonesse's mournful peal, but this time from within the walls as they are overwhelmed. King Gradlon awakens to the catastrophe. He seizes his daughter, mounts his magical horse, and flees the drowning city, riding desperately for the high ground as the waves chase at his heels. But the weight of their flight is too great. A divine voice, some say that of Saint Guinalé, tells the king that his survival depends on casting the source of his sin into the sea. In a moment of agonizing choice, he pushes Dahut from the saddle. The waters claim her, and as she sinks, she is transformed, not into a lifeless form, but into a Morgan, a spirit of the deep, a being of the sea forever bound to the realm she destroyed. Gradlon reaches safety, founding the city of Quimper, but he is a king forever haunted. The legend of Wise is a stark moral compass carved from folklore. It is a parable about the peril of neglecting duty and the cascading consequences of a single act of treachery or poor judgment. The locked gate was not just a physical barrier, it was a symbol of restraint, of the covenant between a ruler and his people's safety. Dahut's act, whether born of love or defiance, shattered that covenant utterly, and the transformation of the princess into a sea spirit adds a layer of profound melancholy. She becomes both a warning and a permanent feature of the landscape, a spectral presence said to still sing sailors to their doom, forever tied to the tragedy she set in motion. The story explains the very real and dangerous tides of the Brittany coast, but more importantly, it explores a timeless tension, the fragile wall we build between civilization and chaos, and how easily that wall can fall when the key is placed in the wrong hands. A mountain of greenery dripping with cool water and fragrant blossoms, rising impossibly from the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia. This is the enduring vision of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the only one of the 7 wonders whose location and very existence remain a profound historical mystery. According to ancient accounts, this marvel was an act of love. King Nebuchadnezzar II, ruler of the Neo-Babylonian Empire in the 6th century before the Common Era, is said to have built the gardens for his wife, Amytis. She was a princess from the lush, mountainous lands of Media, and legend tells us she grew deeply homesick for the green forests and cool air of her homeland in the flat, arid expanse of Babylon. To ease her sorrow, the king commanded a miracle of engineering, a private paradise that would defy the very desert around it. The descriptions that have come down to us, primarily from later Greek historians, paint a staggering picture. They were not hanging in the sense of being suspended from ropes, but rather built upon a series of ascending stone terraces, like a stepped pyramid dedicated to life itself. These terraces, some accounts say reaching a height of 75 feet, were supported by massive stone arches and columns, creating shaded colonnades beneath. The true wonder, however, was hidden within the structure. To sustain a mountain of soil, trees, and vines in that climate would have required a hydraulic system of genius. Ancient writers described a complex network of screws, pumps, and cisterns, likely powered by slaves turning a wheel that lifted water from the Euphrates River to the very top of the construction. From there, it would cascade down from terrace to terrace, nourishing every level in a perpetual, artificial rainfall. It was a vision of absolute dominion, not just over people, but over nature itself, a declaration that even a desert could bloom if a king willed it. Yet, for all its detailed legend, the Hanging Gardens present a tantalizing archaeological silence. Extensive excavations at the site of ancient Babylon, in modern-day Iraq, have revealed the grandeur of Nebuchadnezzar's city, its famed Ishtar Gate and towering walls. But no definitive trace of these legendary terraced gardens has ever been found. No unusual foundation patterns, no evidence of the monumental irrigation system, no contemporary Babylonian inscriptions that mention their construction. This absence has led scholars to propose fascinating theories. Perhaps the gardens were not in Babylon at all, but in the Assyrian capital of Nineveh, built by a different king a century earlier. Perhaps they were a poetic exaggeration, a traveler's tale that grew in the telling, blending the real marvel of Babylonian engineering with a romantic story of royal devotion. Or perhaps they were real, and their remains simply lie undiscovered, or were obliterated so completely by time that we will never find them. This very mystery, however, is what cements their legendary status. The Hanging Gardens transcend archaeology to become a pure symbol of longing and creation. They represent the human desire to conquer geography with love, to reshape a hostile environment into a personal sanctuary. They are the ultimate fusion of romantic gesture and technological ambition, a dream of impossible beauty so powerful that for over 2 millennia we have refused to stop believing it was once somehow real. The dream of a hidden city did not end with ancient maps or medieval letters. In the early 20th century, as the last blank spaces on the globe were being filled in, one man became convinced that the greatest discovery of all still awaited him deep in the green heart of the Amazon. Colonel Percy Fawcett was a British explorer of the old school, seasoned by years of mapping remote borders for the Royal Geographical Society. He was no armchair dreamer, but a hardened veteran of the jungle. Yet, over his many expeditions, he became captivated by a theory that would consume his life. He believed the Amazon, long dismissed by academics as a green desert incapable of supporting advanced civilization, had once been home to a magnificent ancient metropolis. He called it simply and mysteriously the Lost City of Z. His conviction was not born from thin air. In the dense undergrowth, he and his teams had discovered intriguing fragments of high-quality ancient pottery. More compelling were the indigenous stories he collected, tales passed down for generations that spoke of a great stone city hidden in the remote regions, a place of tall towers and immense wealth. For Fawcett, these were not myths but clues. He began to piece together a vision of a sophisticated pre-Columbian culture that had mastered the rainforest, a counterpart to the Maya or Inca, waiting to be revealed to the modern world. In 1925, funded by newspapers and fueled by his unwavering belief, Fawcett embarked on his final expedition. Accompanied only by his eldest son, Jack, and Jack's friend Rolly Rimmel, he deliberately traveled light, refusing to take a large, cumbersome party. His last known communication was a letter sent back from a remote outpost, expressing optimism and stating he was about to enter unexplored territory. Then silence. The three men vanished into the endless green, never to be seen again. It was this disappearance, as complete and enigmatic as any legendary city, that transformed Fawcett from an explorer into a legend himself. His fate became one of the great unsolved mysteries of the exploration age, sparking over 100 subsequent rescue missions. Dozens of these would-be explorers themselves fell victim to disease, hostile encounters, or simply vanished in the same vast wilderness. With no body and no proof, the story blossomed. Had Fawcett found his city and chosen to live there in seclusion? Had he stumbled upon a secret still guarded by uncontacted peoples? Or had the jungle, as it did to so many, simply claimed him? His quest and its haunting end blurred the line between historical search and modern folklore, directly inspiring Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's novel The Lost World and countless other tales of hidden realms. Fawcett's City of Z represents the last gasp of terrestrial mystery, a testament to the power of a single, unshakable idea. It shows how a real man's ambition and ultimate loss can fuel a myth just as potent as any from antiquity, proving that the age of enchanted realms did not end with the closing of the map, but simply retreated into the last, impenetrable jungles of the human mind. The vanishing of Fawcett and his City of Z was a mystery of the modern age, but the 20th century also produced a vanishing village that was a pure and conscious work of art. In the highlands of a Broadway stage, a village named Brigadoon sleeps under an enchantment. Created for the beloved 1940s musical, the story tells of two American tourists who stumble upon this Scottish hamlet during a hunting trip, a place not found on any map. The villagers are warm, clad in old-fashioned dress, and celebrating a wedding with joyous traditional music. But as the day unfolds, the visitors learn the haunting truth. In the 1700s, the village minister, fearing the spread of witchcraft into the community, prayed for a miracle of protection. His prayer was answered with a profound and lonely bargain. To save itself, Brigadoon would fall into a deep sleep, vanishing from the world and only reappearing for a single day every 100 years. For its people, time outside their one day barely passes, a concept that echoes the fairy tales of old. This enchantment creates the central, bittersweet conflict, a romance that blooms in a single afternoon but must span a century. The story's power lies in its direct appeal to a modern longing. Brigadoon is not a lost city to be conquered, but a refuge to be cherished. It represents a world untouched by industrial noise, global wars, or the frantic pace of modern life, a place where community and tradition are preserved in perfect amber. Its magic is a self-imposed isolation, a choice to opt out of history's turbulence altogether. While it is a modern theatrical invention, its roots dig deep into the same soil as older Celtic legends. The idea of a place that exists on a different time scale, that appears and vanishes at its own whim, is a direct descendant of the fairy realm and islands like Hy-Brasil. The minister's prayer formalizes what ancient folklore simply accepted, that the otherworld is a sanctuary with its own rules. Brigadoon succeeded because it packaged this ancient yearning into a beautiful, romantic fable for a post-war audience. It asked a poignant question: what would you sacrifice for a love or a way of life that exists outside of time? The village endures not as a place anyone expects to find, but as a feeling, a melody of nostalgia for a simpler world we fear is disappearing, not by magic, but by the slow and steady march of the everyday. The dream of golden cities was not confined to the southern jungles. It found a new, colder home in the vast forests of North America, a phantom kingdom born from a single, fateful conversation. In the 1530s, the French explorer Jacques Cartier was navigating the great waterway of the St. Lawrence River, seeking a passage to Asia and establishing contact with the local Iroquois peoples. During these exchanges, he was told of a land far to the north, a place the indigenous guides called the Kingdom of Saguenay. The descriptions were astonishing. They spoke of immense wealth, of men with pale skin and blonde hair who possessed great quantities of gold, copper, and rich furs. They told of cities where these precious materials were abundant, ruled by a single powerful king. For Cartier and the French crown that sponsored him, this was not just a story, it was a revelation. Here, in this seemingly untamed wilderness, was a potential northern El Dorado, a realm that could rival the riches Spain was extracting from the south. The legend took immediate and powerful hold on the European imagination, shifting the focus of New World ambition from tropical paradises to a boreal empire of treasure. But what were the indigenous storytellers actually describing? Historians now believe the narrative was a complex tapestry woven from several threads. First, it likely contained kernels of geographical truth about extensive indigenous trade networks that stretched deep into the continent. The Iroquois knew of distant sources for copper from the Great Lakes region and fine furs from the north, commodities that were indeed traded as valuable goods. The blonde men may have been a reference to other indigenous groups with lighter hair, or perhaps even a distant, garbled memory of Norse explorers from the Viking Age who had briefly settled in Newfoundland centuries earlier. Second, there was almost certainly an element of strategic storytelling. Sharing tales of a wealthy kingdom elsewhere could have been a way to redirect the newcomer's attention and ambitions away from the teller's own lands, a diplomatic maneuver to guide these powerful strangers elsewhere. Finally, and most crucially, there was the powerful filter of European wishful thinking. Cartier and his men were primed by the El Dorado myth to hear exactly what they wanted to hear. Every mention of metal became gold, every description of a prosperous village became a city, and every account of a leader became a mighty king. The legend of Saguenay thus became a self-fulfilling prophecy of exploration. It drove French trappers and missionaries deeper into the Canadian interior, up the river that bears the kingdom's name, the Saguenay, and into the heart of the continent. They were searching for a city of gold, but what they ultimately mapped was a land of immense natural resources, of forests and waterways that would fuel a different kind of empire, one built on fur and timber. The kingdom itself never materialized, but the quest for it opened the door. Once again, a mythical realm, born from a cross-cultural misunderstanding and amplified by desire, altered the course of real-world exploration, proving that a story told around a campfire could change the map as surely as any compass. The relentless search for earthly treasure or hidden cities speaks to a hunger for something tangible, but the human imagination has also dreamed of a reward that can only be earned, a paradise not found on any map but reached only at the end of a worthy life. For the ancient Greeks, the afterlife was often a shadowy, neutral existence in the realm of Hades, a place of gray shades and faded memory. Yet, for a select few, there shone a promise of something far brighter, a destination reserved for those touched by the gods or proven by extraordinary virtue. This was Elysium, also known as the Isles of the Blessed, a paradisiacal realm situated at the very edge of the world where the ocean met the sky. Unlike the murky gloom of the common underworld, Elysium was bathed in a soft, eternal light. Homer described it as a place where life is easiest for men, where no snow falls, no strong wind blows, and the cooling west wind from the ocean whispers perpetually to refresh its inhabitants. Imagine endless meadows of asphodel, the pale, lovely flower of the afterlife, stretching toward a tranquil seashore. Here, heroes like Achilles and Menelaus were said to dwell in a state of perfect, peaceful contentment, free from toil and sorrow. This was not a place of idle luxury, but of gentle activity and intellectual pleasure, where the greatest minds and bravest warriors could converse, compete in friendly games, and enjoy the arts forever. The criteria for entry evolved over time. Initially, it was the exclusive reward for mortals related to the Olympian gods, heroes born from divine unions. Later, the concept expanded through the works of poets like Pindar and the philosophies of mystery cults. It became a reward for the just, the virtuous, and the initiated, those who had lived a life of piety and honor. This shift was profound, transforming Elysium from a closed club of the semi-divine into a moral compass, an aspirational ideal that suggested a meaningful life could literally shape your eternity. The vision of these sun-drenched isles at the world's edge left an indelible mark on Western thought. Its imagery of restful meadows, gentle climates, and a community of the righteous provided a foundational template for later Christian and Islamic conceptions of heaven. More broadly, it shaped our secular ideas of utopia, that dream of a perfected society in a perfect landscape. Elysium offered one of humanity's earliest and most beautiful answers to a timeless question: what awaits those who live a life of greatness or goodness? It proposed that the ultimate enchanted realm might not be a physical place we can stumble upon, but a final, earned destination, a testament to the belief that some stories deserve a truly happy ending. While Elysium offered a spiritual reward, the 19th century sought a scientific one, a rational explanation for a very peculiar puzzle. Biologists were grappling with a curious distribution, the presence of lemur fossils not only on the island of Madagascar but also in parts of India and Africa. To explain how these small primates could have crossed such vast stretches of open ocean, the British zoologist Philip Sclater proposed a bold, logical theory in 1864. He suggested a lost land bridge, a sunken continent in the Indian Ocean he named Lemuria, after the lemurs it would have carried. For a time, this was a legitimate, if speculative, scientific hypothesis, a geological placeholder for a mystery that plate tectonics would later solve. But the story of Lemuria was only beginning, and its journey from scientific paper to spiritual myth is a fascinating one. The theory was swiftly adopted and utterly transformed by the burgeoning theosophical movement, led by the formidable Helena Blavatsky. In her seminal work, The Secret Doctrine, published in 1888, Lemuria was no mere land bridge. It became a vast, primordial continent in the Pacific, the home of the third root race in a cosmology of human spiritual evolution. These Lemurians, in her description, were not simple primates, but a race of enormous, egg-laying beings with a third eye and highly developed psychic abilities. They were spiritually advanced yet physically ethereal, a civilization that existed before the fall into pure materialism. Blavatsky wove elements of then-current scientific speculation, like the search for a missing link, with esoteric traditions from around the world, creating a grand, alternative history. This reinterpretation was pivotal. Lemuria became the Pacific's direct counterpart to the Atlantic's Atlantis, completing a global mythology of sunken, enlightened ancestors. While Atlantis was often framed as a cautionary tale of technological hubris, theosophical Lemuria represented an earlier, more spiritually pure stage of humanity, a lost golden age of psychic connection and etheric form. This narrative proved incredibly fertile ground for 20th century New Age thought. Lemuria, sometimes conflated with the mythical continent of Mu, became a beacon of lost ancient wisdom, a place where crystal energies healed and telepathy was the norm. Channels and psychics claimed to receive messages from Lemurian elders, and locations from Mount Shasta in California to parts of New Zealand were identified as surviving fragments or energy portals connected to this sunken world. The legacy of Lemuria, therefore, is a perfect case study in how a myth is born. It shows how a scientific idea, once its original purpose is obsolete, can be reclaimed by the human hunger for meaning and woven into a grander, more mystical tapestry. It serves as a mirror not for ancient fears but for modern spiritual longing, a desire to believe that our deepest intuition and psychic potential are echoes from a continent we once called home, now resting silently beneath the Pacific waves. The shimmering promise of gold was a fever that crossed continents, and it found a new, arid canvas in the deserts of the American Southwest. This was the legend of the 7 cities of Cibola, a tale that began not with a king but with a shipwrecked survivor. Alvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca had endured an incredible 8-year odyssey across the southern part of the continent, finally stumbling into a Spanish outpost in Mexico in 1536. His accounts of the lands to the north were extraordinary. He spoke of hearing stories from indigenous peoples about great cities with buildings many stories high constructed from stone. In the eager ears of the Spanish colonial officials, these descriptions of impressive multi-story pueblos were instantly translated into a vision of the next great prize, 7 cities brimming with the gold and turquoise of a New Mexico. To confirm these tantalizing rumors, the Viceroy sent a Franciscan friar, Marcos de Niza, on a scouting expedition. What Friar Marcos claimed to see from a distant hilltop would ignite a frenzy. He returned with a report of a city so large it rivaled the great capital of Mexico City itself, a place where the common people used vessels of gold and silver. His account, likely a mixture of hopeful misinterpretation, the dazzling effect of the sun on adobe walls, and perhaps a desire to please his patrons, was the final spark. In 1540, a massive expedition was assembled under the command of the nobleman Francisco Vázquez de Coronado. It was a formidable force featuring over 300 Spanish soldiers, hundreds of indigenous allies, and vast herds of livestock, all marching north under the banner of God and gold, chasing a mirage painted in words. After months of grueling travel, Coronado's vanguard finally reached their destination, the Zuni pueblo of Huaca. What they saw was not a metropolis of gleaming towers, but a sturdy, terraced community of sun-baked clay. There was no gold, only the hard reality of a people defending their home. The encounter quickly turned to conflict, with the Spanish attacking and capturing the pueblo. The profound disappointment that followed was palpable, a crushing realization that the legendary 7 cities were in fact the interconnected villages of the Zuni and other pueblo peoples, remarkable communities of great cultural wealth, but not of the precious metal the Spanish sought. Coronado, unwilling to admit total defeat, pushed his expedition further onto the Great Plains, chasing other whispers of gold, but finding only vast grasslands and the reality of hardship. The quest for Cibola ended not with treasure, but with a legacy of cultural clash and a painful lesson in the power of a story to bend perception. It stands as a stark companion to the El Dorado myth, another chapter where the human hunger for legend transformed living, complex cultures into mere waypoints on a map to a fantasy, leaving behind a trail of shattered expectations and altered lives. The wind that carries the seasons and the sun that marks the days must have a home, a place from which all the world's rhythms emerge. For the ancient Slavs, this cosmic command center was not a distant star or a mountain peak, but an island adrift in the sea. They called it Buyan, a place of profound and shifting magic. Unlike the fixed paradises of other myths, Buyan was inherently mobile, appearing and disappearing from the ocean mists at its own whim, impossible to chart or ever truly find. This constant motion made it a living entity, a piece of the other world that refused to be pinned down. At its heart, according to the oldest folk spells and tales, rested the Agartha stone. This was no ordinary rock, but a sacred, glowing object often described as the mother of all stones, the navel of the world. Upon it, the great world tree was sometimes said to grow, its branches holding up the heavens and its roots delving into the underworld, making Buyan the ultimate axis mundi, the still point around which the turning universe revolved. This mystical island was far more than a scenic wonder. It was the operational heart of nature itself. Slavic folklore tells us that Buyan was the dwelling place of powerful solar deities and the spirits who commanded the weather. The daily journey of the sun was managed from here, and the island was directly invoked in ancient charms and incantations aimed at controlling the elements. To heal a sickness caused by a sudden chill, a healer might recite a spell calling upon Buyan to restrain the violent winds. To ensure a safe journey, a traveler might whisper a plea to the island to calm the waves. It was the source from which all storms issued and to which they returned, a place where the raw forces of the world were housed and with the right words could be petitioned or placated. The island was also home to mythic birds of prophecy and formidable spirits like the Baba Yaga, who in some tales would travel to Buyan to renew her power, connecting this mobile realm to the wider tapestry of Slavic magical beings. In this cosmology, Buyan served a function both beautifully simple and deeply profound. It was the engine room of reality, the place where the mechanisms controlling day and night, summer and winter were maintained. By imagining this control panel as a moving island, Slavic belief embedded a core truth about the natural world. It is powerful, essential, and ultimately beyond human domination. We can ask for its favor, we can try to understand its rhythms through myth, but we cannot command it. Buyan, forever appearing and vanishing in the ocean, represents that sublime mystery. It is the belief that the order we depend on springs from a source that is itself wild and untamable, a sacred secret carried on the ever-shifting sea. The story of Oisin and Tir na an Og is perhaps the most achingly beautiful of all the Irish tales about the otherworld. It begins not with a quest but with an invitation. The great warrior Oisin, son of the legendary leader Fionn mac Cumhaill, was out hunting when he saw a woman approaching on a white horse. She was Niamh of the golden hair, and she had ridden across the western sea from a land where sorrow and decay were unknown. She had come for him, drawn by the songs of his bravery. She described Tir na an Og, the land of youth, as a place of eternal feasting, music and love, where the trees bore fruit forever and no one ever grew old. Enchanted by her and the promise of this perfect realm, Oisin climbed onto her horse and they rode across the waves, leaving the mortal world behind. In Tir na an Og, time did not obey the rules he knew. He lived there with Niamh in happiness for what felt like 3 blissful years, though in the world he left behind 3 centuries had passed. Yet a quiet homesickness began to grow in his heart. He longed to see his father and his comrades, the Fianna, one more time. Niamh, with deep foreboding, agreed to let him visit, but she gave him one absolute condition. He must not dismount from the magical white horse. If his feet were to touch the soil of Ireland, she warned, the centuries he had outlived would claim him instantly. Oisin returned to find a changed and unfamiliar land. The fort of his father was in ruins, overgrown with grass, and the people he met seemed small and fearful, speaking of the Fianna as giants from a forgotten age. While traveling, he saw a group of men struggling to move a large stone. Moved by their effort, he leaned from his saddle to help them, using his great strength to heave the stone aside. In that moment of strain, his saddle girth broke and he tumbled to the ground. The moment he touched the earth, the spell of Tir na an Og shattered. The youthful hero vanished, replaced by a man of immense age, his body weathered by 300 years in an instant. The story is often told as a simple warning about the rules of the fairy realm, but its power lies much deeper. It is a profound exploration of the cost of longing and the irreversible nature of certain choices. Oisin's tragedy is not one of punishment but of simple, natural law. He had lived outside of time, and time, once invited back in, collects its due. The land itself becomes the agent of this transition, the soil of his homeland acting as a conduit for the reality he had escaped. His story captures the dual nature of the enchanted realm. It is a paradise, but it is also a kind of exile. To choose its timeless joy is to sever your connection to the flowing stream of your own world, your own people, and your own history. The tale ends with Oisin, now an ancient man, sharing the stories of the Fianna with St. Patrick before his passing, bridging the pagan heroic age and the new Christian world. In this, the myth offers a gentle consolation. While the body cannot escape time, the stories can. The memory of Tir na and Og and the love Oisin found there becomes itself a kind of eternal realm, preserved not in a land across the sea, but in the songs and poems passed down through the centuries. Disappointment in the stone pueblos of Cibola did not extinguish the Spanish thirst for gold. It merely redirected the search. As Francisco Vázquez de Coronado's massive expedition camped through a bitter winter, a new story began to circulate through the ranks, whispered by a captive guide the Spaniards called El Turco, the Turk. This man spoke of a land far to the northeast, a place named Quivira. His descriptions were the stuff of conquistador dreams. He told of a ruler who napped beneath a tree hung with tiny golden bells that lulled him to sleep with their gentle music. He spoke of vast quantities of the precious metal, so common that the common people used it for their everyday utensils. For Coronado, this was a second chance, a reason to push onward and justify the enormous cost and hardship of the expedition. In the spring of 1541, driven by this fresh mirage, he led a lighter force of soldiers and guides, with El Turco leading the way, out onto the immense sea of grass that was the Great Plains. For weeks they traveled, following the promise deeper into the unknown. The landscape itself was a shock, a rolling, treeless expanse unlike anything in their European experience, where the horizon seemed to stretch forever. Finally, after this grueling journey, they reached their destination, the province of Quivira. What they found was not a city of gold, but a collection of villages belonging to the Wichita people. The homes were not stone palaces, but large, conical dwellings skillfully thatched with grass, cool in summer and warm in winter, perfectly adapted to the plains environment. There was copper, a valuable trade item, but no gold. The rich land the Turk described was rich in a different way, abundant with crops of corn, beans, and squash, and populated by a sophisticated, organized society. The golden bells, it seems, were either a beautiful metaphor or a deliberate fabrication. El Turco, under harsh questioning after the crushing letdown, eventually confessed that the leaders of the Pueblo peoples, hoping to be rid of the burdensome Spanish presence, had encouraged him to lure the expedition out onto the plains where they might become lost or perish. Quivira, then, represents the next logical step in a heartbreaking pattern. It was a myth born from a volatile cocktail of deliberate misdirection, desperate hope, and profound cultural misunderstanding. The Spanish heard tales of prosperity and translated them directly into terms of their own obsession, metallic wealth. The indigenous peoples, witnessing this obsession, used it as a strategic tool, a story weapon to redirect a dangerous and destabilizing force away from their homes. Coronado, having reached the end of his dream, eventually turned back toward Mexico, his expedition a financial disaster that marked the end of large-scale Spanish searches for golden cities in the north. Yet the name Quivira lingered on maps for centuries, a ghostly placeholder for a kingdom that was never a kingdom, a treasure that was the land itself and the people who lived upon it, their true value unrecognized by those who sought only the glint of a different metal. High above the earthly turmoil, in the pure and rarefied air beyond the highest clouds, Chinese mythology envisioned realms of perfect order and eternal grace. Here, the celestial bureaucracy mirrored the imperial court below, but perfected, free from the flaws of mortal rule. At its apex sat the Jade Emperor, the supreme deity who governed all of heaven, earth, and the underworld with a serene and impartial authority. His heavenly court was not a place of wild revelry, but of solemn ritual and harmonious administration, where deities and immortals held specific posts, managed cosmic departments, and filed reports on the state of creation. This was a paradise defined by structure, hierarchy, and the serene pursuit of spiritual refinement. To gain entry was not a matter of luck or fairy kidnapping, but of deliberate, arduous self-cultivation. Through meditation, moral living, and the practice of Taoist arts, a human could accumulate enough spiritual merit to shed their mortal body and ascend as an immortal, or Zion, taking their place in this eternal hierarchy. Some, however, could gain a taste of this eternity through magical means. The Queen Mother of the West, a powerful and ancient goddess, presided over a paradise on the mythical Mount Kunlun, where she cultivated a garden of peach trees that bore fruit only once every 3,000 years. To eat one of these peaches was to be granted immortality itself, a direct ticket to the celestial ranks. This vision stands in stark contrast to the enchanted realms of Western folklore. Where the fairy realm is unpredictable, governed by capricious rules and wild magic, the Chinese heavens are the epitome of cosmic order. Where a Western hero might stumble into the otherworld by accident, the Chinese seeker must strive with focused discipline for a lifetime. The fairy ring is a random doorway, the peach of immortality is an earned reward. This difference reflects a fundamental philosophical outlook. The celestial realms are not an escape from reality, but its ultimate fulfillment, a universe where every being has a proper place and function, and where eternity is not a static bliss, but a state of perfect, harmonious participation in the great celestial machine. It is a vision of paradise not as a rebellious holiday from rules, but as the rules themselves, executed with flawless, beautiful precision forever. Another kingdom sleeps beneath the waves, its story carried on the salt winds that sweep into Cardigan Bay. This is Cantre'r Gwaelod, the Lowland Hundred, a legendary Welsh realm said to lie drowned beneath those grey waters. In its time, it was described as a kingdom of extraordinary fertility, a flat and prosperous plain protected from the sea only by a great defensive dike and a series of carefully maintained sluice gates. The security of this entire paradise and the lives of everyone within it depended entirely on the vigilance of the gatekeeper. And here, as in so many of these tales, the hinge of fate turns on a single, flawed individual. The keeper's name was Sethanin, and the legends about his failure vary in their details but converge on a theme of tragic neglect. In one version, he was a devoted but heartbroken man, distracted by a failed romance, his attention turned inward as a great storm gathered. In another, far more common telling, he was the life of the party, a prince known for his fondness for drink, who abandoned his post to join a feast in the king's hall. As the storm surge rose, pounding against the dike, the sluice gates went unattended. No one was there to close them at the crucial hour. The sea found its way in, first a trickle, then a torrent, and finally a catastrophic flood that swallowed the Lowland Hundred whole. The bells of its churches, like those of Lyonesse, are said to still ring out from beneath the bay in times of peril, a phantom echo of the alarm that went unheeded. This story, so similar to the Breton tale of Wise, serves the same powerful dual purpose. On one level, it is a folk explanation for a visible geological truth. The coastline of Wales shows clear evidence of having been inhabited much further out to sea in ancient times. The legend provides a narrative for that loss, transforming the slow processes of coastal erosion and rising sea levels into a single, dramatic night of divine retribution or human error. On another level, it is a crystal-clear moral fable. The duty was simple, the rules were known, and the consequences of forgetting them were absolute. Seathanin's lapse, whether born of sorrow or celebration, doomed an entire world. It is a warning about the fragility of collective safety and how that safety often rests on the reliability of just one person at a critical post. The Drowned Kingdom reminds us that some borders are maintained not by stone alone, but by constant, unwavering attention, and that when that attention falters, the world we know can be washed away in a single roaring night. At the western edge of the world, where the sun completed its daily journey, Greek myth placed a garden of divine and perilous beauty. This was the garden of the Hesperides, a sacred orchard belonging to Hera, queen of the gods. Unlike the sprawling fields of Elysium, this was a private, enclosed grove, a place of such profound value that its protection was absolute. The garden was tended by the Hesperides, nymphs whose very name meant daughters of the evening, their presence a soft twilight glow among the trees. Yet they were not its sole guardians. Coiled around the central tree, with watchful eyes at the end of each of its 100 heads, lay the dragon Ladon, a creature of immense power and unwavering vigilance, placed there by Hera herself. The object of this formidable security was a single, miraculous tree, a gift from Gaia to Hera upon her wedding to Zeus. Its fruit were apples of solid, radiant gold, and they held the power to confer immortality upon any mortal who tasted them. This was not a public paradise, but a vault of divine essence, a symbol of a privilege so great it was reserved for the gods alone. The garden's legendary status was cemented when it became the setting for one of Hercules' most famous labors. As his 11th task, the hero was commanded to retrieve 3 of these golden apples. He could not simply storm the garden, for its location was a secret and its guardians were beyond mere strength. His success required guile, persuasion, and assistance from figures like the Titan Atlas, weaving a tale of cleverness around the brute force for which he was known. The Garden of the Hesperides, therefore, represents a very specific kind of enchanted realm. It is not a lost civilization or a refuge for humanity. It is a divine stronghold, a treasure so precious it exists behind layers of mythic security. The golden apples symbolize the ultimate prize, the thing just beyond mortal reach that promises to transform our very nature. The story asks a poignant question: what would we risk, and what cleverness would we need to summon to grasp a piece of eternity? It reminds us that in mythology, the greatest wonders are never left unguarded, for they hold the very power of the gods themselves. 25 realms, each with its own unique story, yet together they form a breathtaking tapestry woven from the same few powerful threads. When we step back from the individual legends, a fascinating pattern emerges, revealing that these stories are not random fantasies, but deeply purposeful creations of the human spirit. They act as collective mirrors, reflecting our most profound desires and anxieties back at us across the centuries. The most persistent reflection is our longing for utopia, a perfect society free from the flaws we see in our own. Whether it is the spiritual harmony of Shangri-La, the scholarly peace of a hollow earth Agartha, or the simple, sensual abundance of Cibola, these realms give shape to our dream of a better way to live. They are blueprints for worlds without war, without scarcity, without the petty injustices that plague daily life. Closely tied to this is the bittersweet nostalgia for a lost golden age, a time before a great fall. Atlantis and Dilmun embody this perfectly, representing a primordial state of perfection and divine favor that was somehow corrupted or lost, leaving us with a haunting sense that we were once closer to the gods or to a purer version of ourselves. These stories answer a painful question: if the world is flawed, how did it become so? The answer is often a paradise now sunken or sealed away. Another powerful theme is the hunger for hidden knowledge, the belief that somewhere the true answers are preserved. The celestial bureaucracy of the Chinese heavens holds cosmic truths, while Agartha and Lemuria are envisioned as vast libraries of lost science and psychic wisdom, safeguarding secrets from a more enlightened past. This speaks to a fundamental human faith that understanding exists, even if it is currently beyond our grasp. On a more immediate level, these legends often serve as profound explanations for the terrifying forces of nature. The drowned bells of Lyonesse and Cantre'r Gwaelod, or the sudden cataclysm that sank Wise, transform the slow, impersonal processes of coastal erosion and rising sea levels into narratives with clear cause and effect, usually human error. They give a story to a geological event, making the unpredictable world feel more comprehensible, if no less tragic. To house these themes, the myths employ a shared set of enchanting motifs. Water is a constant agent of both separation and preservation, with sinking and flooding serving as the ultimate clean eraser, removing a realm from our world while keeping its promise intact beneath the waves. Mist and veils, like those shrouding Avalon and Hy-Brasil, create a permeable border, suggesting the realm is always almost within reach, yet forever elusive. The manipulation of time, whether it is the century-spanning day in Brigadoon or the accelerated aging in Ternagh and Og, highlights the otherworld as a place operating under different fundamental laws. And access is never casual, it is always guarded. There is a key, like the one in Wise, a condition, like not dismounting from the fairy horse, or a fearsome guardian, like the dragon Ladon. This teaches that paradise is not stumbled upon by accident. It must be earned, or its secrets deserved. Ultimately, these enchanted realms almost always exist on a border, in a literal or metaphorical liminal space. They thrive at the edge of the map between land and sea, like Hy-Brasil. They flourish between earth and sky, like the celestial heavens. They pulse in the space between reality and dream, accessible only at dusk or dawn. This positioning is the final clue to their purpose. They are not meant to be found in our mundane, mapped world. They exist in the imaginative borderlands, in the creative space between what is and what could be. They are the eternal dwelling places of our hopes for utopia, our grief for lost wisdom, our explanations for disaster, and our timeless wonder at a world that always seems to hold just one more secret, shimmering just beyond the next horizon or the next page. These 25 legends are more than just stories. They are the fundamental architecture of human wonder, a shared language we have spoken for millennia to make sense of an often senseless world. They provided our ancestors with explanations where science was silent, offering narratives for the rising seas, the shifting lands, and the stars above. They established moral frameworks, teaching through vivid parables about the cost of pride, the duty of vigilance, and the rewards of virtue. And perhaps most importantly, they granted the ultimate escape, a mental refuge where the spirit could rest from hardship in a land of endless feasts, gentle winds, or eternal youth. Even now, in an age where satellites have mapped every mountain and valley, the enchantment persists. We no longer draw phantom islands on nautical charts, but we fill science fiction with hidden planets and virtual realities with digital paradises. The craving has not vanished, it has simply evolved. We still need the borderlands, the places just beyond the edge of the known. They are the playgrounds for our imagination and the repositories for our hopes, proving that the most real realms are often the ones we build not from stone but from story. So, as we close this atlas of the imagined, we turn the question to you. Which of these legendary realms speaks most deeply to your own sense of wonder? Is it the sunken spires of Atlantis, the misty orchards of Avalon, or the quiet, scholarly halls of Shangri-La? Share your favorite in the comments below. The conversation about these enchanted lands is one that has been going on for thousands of years, and your voice is the next chapter.